What would you like to see the 49ers do in this year's draft? And you can go anywhere with this. You can go, hey, I want them to trade this player. I want them to trade back. I want them to take said player or this position. What would you like to see them do, ideally?
Yeah, and look, I don't claim to be an X's and O's guy in the sense that I've done deep dive into this draft and I know, I'm scouting these players and all that. I don't have enough time. I'm not interested enough to watch the all 22s on these college players. Shout out to Marco. Shout out to, all of the, even you, Jesse. I know you do that well as well. All of those guys that are giving you their draft crushes and stuff, that's great. For me, it's more about philosophy, Jesse. And for me, I want them to focus on best player available in the first round. Like we mentioned it a couple weeks ago when we did our last show, when we were breaking it down. And I know percentage-wise, like they're a little bit, they're right at they're below the average, but like right around the average. But to me, if you're picking if you're using a first round draft pick, that person needs to be an impact player on your team. You can't be somebody that isn't on your team, 5 years later or never amounted to what they needed to, what they wanted to be. And the 49ers, more times than not, are picking players that either don't pan out, aren't on the team, or, just never made an impact. The two that they have drafted that were great are Nick Bosa and Brandon Ayuk, both of which were, all pro type players. But for me, they have this constant philosophy to go defensive line, Jesse. And when you look at what they've drafted along the defensive line in the first 2 rounds under this regime, it hasn't been good. Obviously, you got Nick Bosa, which bails you out, but Nick Bosa was a kind of a no-brainer pick. Arizona went with, the quarterback, and Nick Bosa was the best player in that draft, and he just fell to the 49ers at 2. But Solomon Thomas, even though he's still in the league, not the impact that a first-round draft pick should be. Javon Kinlaw, even though he's still in the league, not the impact that a first-round draft pick should be. You look at Drake Jackson, second-round pick, not the impact, that a second-round draft pick should be. So
Mike
for
McGlinchey.
See, here's the thing. Mike McGlinchey, for me, is still a starter, like an impact starter in the league. He was injured last season, but he did get broken off as far as a contract. He's one of the best right guards in the league, right tackles in the league, whether people want to admit it or not. It just shows how weak the right tackle position is, that Mike McGlinchey is probably a top 10 right tackle in the league. But all of those, and let's throw Mike McGlinchey in there if you want to say that he isn't the impact that you want as a first-round draft pick. All of those were reaches in my estimation, that they were going best player available at a position of need versus just best talent there, best player there, regardless if you have that position filled, regardless of, what the case may be. And if that guy, if they're not ready to take that best player available, trade out. Like, don't reach for a position, stack the assets. I've been saying, the Eagles, Howie Roseman, to me, is a master when it comes to the draft. He's either going to take the best player available or he's going to stack picks for the future. Seems like the Eagles always have multiple first-round picks. And I think that the 49ers need to start playing that game where it is like, hey, if you don't have the guy, either get better picks in this draft or stack up future picks, because now that's their main well of opportunity when it comes to getting high-level talent. It's not going to be in free agency like it's been in the past. They have to start hitting with high-level talent more in the draft and not just banking on the later half of the draft where they usually do go best player available, but really have to get that high-level potential, high-level talent and hit on some of these first and second-round draft picks. So for me, it's more strategy. I said it in a long way. My dream is that they just go best player available or stack up future assets if that guy isn't there.
I want to stick with something you said towards the tail end. You talked about accumulating future picks as well, and you would be okay with that. I agree with that. I think this year's draft and next year's draft are extremely important. If the 49ers, John Lynch talked about sometimes you're drafting players for future needs as well, which is fine. As long as you think that the player you are drafting can fill those future needs and you see a role for him in the future and you think he's going to be good enough, then do it. But don't draft, even if it's late in the draft, don't draft a position of need. If you only have 170 players that are worth it and you're in the fourth round and somehow like those guys are gone, most of those guys are gone or what have you, and you're like, listen, I don't think these guys are going to make an impact, then trade it for something next year and accumulate draft picks next year and try it again. There's nothing wrong with that, especially if you think this team as is good enough to win a Super Bowl. And even if you don't think that there's a player there that's going to help you get that job done, then what's the point? Trade it for the future. It's not sexy, but it's probably the right thing to do. And I agree with you. That's exactly what I put, which is go BPA, but do it all draft, not just round one. Do it all draft. And then ideally, the 49ers would trade back out of round one as well for me. I think that is the move to make for a few weeks now. That's kind of where my mind has been. And I really haven't moved off of that. I think there's definitely some really good prospects there in round two, late round one. But you're gonna get to a point where most likely all of these prospects, regardless of position, are graded similarly. And if that's the case, move back 5, 6, 7 spots if it's available. You have to have a team that's willing to play ball, but if it's available, move back a few spots, get more picks, and just let one of those guys fall into your lap and be fine with it. So for me, I agree with you. Best player available, and trade back whenever you can, or trade for future picks whenever you can, so that you can have as many shots at the dartboard as you can absolutely get. I think that's the right move. That is not the sexy thing. The sexy thing, everybody loves it when they watch their favorite team trade up into the first round to go get X player that they loved. That's not usually the move that long-term pays off, though. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it does, but oftentimes it does not. So I'm 100% in agreement with you on this one.
Yeah. Now I guess we go to reality.
So there is a reality side of this. We've given our opinion. What is the reality? What do we think the 49ers are actually going to do in this draft, in your opinion?
Yeah, and look, this is the first draft without Peters. And we've always kind of had a discussion amongst, us behind, and, guys like Marco and, Rohan and all these guys, like, how much does Adam Peters actually influence this draft? And this is the first draft without him. Is it the scouts? Is it Lynch? I know Brother Bob says it's Kyle Shanahan, but like definitely in these late round draft picks have been amazing for the 49ers. Might be one of the best late round drafters in the league